it was really kind of a slow indoctrination. I had a journal there where I had been kind of writing about this growing dichotomy, tension between who I was, as a gay man and the oppressive religion I was in. It was a thick journal and I'd filled it. And I remember thinking, this is incredibly valuable to me. It was in this journal that I came out to myself.
No,
and it was such a beautiful thing. So I duct taped that journal to the underside of my dresser. So you'd have to reach your hand under and then like up.
Mm-hmm.
While I was gone, my mom called me up and she's like, I found your journal, and I read the whole thing.
Oh.
And I kind of knew like everything was over. My mom asked me to go to a reparative therapy, conversion therapy conference.
Oh.
And I agreed. I agreed to bide time because I knew like I needed a certain amount of time to get things in order so that I could leave. I walk in and I realize that I'm probably the youngest person there. We heard one sad testimony after another of guys who like were married to women and sad and unhappy, but trying to make it work, and guys who had decided to be single. And then, during like breaks, all everyone did was like hit on me. And I'm like, wait,
what?
Guys, what's going on? Like,
can I just say, I'm so glad I didn't get Matthew straight out of the cult. Like, I'm so grateful to those men who came before me.
Yeah.
I know their names. I thank them every night before I go to bed. Because that was such a necessary time for Matthew, and it was so complicated.
Mine is the only voice.
Wow.
What have I been doing?
Lay down my autonomy.
After that, it got very dark very quickly.
Hey, my name is Shalise Ansola, and this is Cults to Consciousness, where we discuss leaving high-demand religions or organizations and finding healing and independence through awareness and true individual sovereignty. If you're only listening, you're definitely going to want to go to our YouTube because I have this most adorable book to show you guys. Head on over to Cults to Consciousness. You can join in on the conversation, leave those words of encouragement for our guests. Guys, it means so much to them, and it boosts the video. It really is the best way to support the podcast, and it's free. Of course, liking and subscribing also helps the channel. We're just about at 300K. I think by the time this releases, we will be at 300K, and I'm just so thrilled that there are so many advocates online willing to support us and our guests. So today's guest, when I tell you the amount of DMs I got about this story, I had already been following him and his husband, and he put out a story, a video about the IBLP, his life in a cult, and I got so many messages flooded. You have to have him on. You have to have him on. So I'm so happy that we finally connected. We'll get into his story. But if you don't already know, thank you so much for joining us, Matthew with Matthew and Paul.
Hi, so glad to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Yes, of course. So your channel, for anyone who's not familiar, you definitely want to go follow. It's such a heartwarming, beautiful channel. You and your husband, you prank him. He is 90% blind, and you do the sweetest little funny pranks. And then Matthew, no, in my head, I'm hearing Matthew because Paul is always like, ah. And Paul is an illustrator, and I have one of his books here, Adoroscopes. I love it. I bought it as soon as our daughter was born, and I'm just going to show you guys one of the illustrations. This is my baby's Adoroscope Pisces. And oh, it's just so beautiful. And so you're definitely going to want to go check out the books that Paul has written and all the funny pranks that Matthew pulls on him. So we're here to talk about you though today, Matthew. So you play the violin so beautifully.
Yes.
And you recently came forward with some of your story on your page about how you were involved in the IBLP, which, for those who aren't familiar, the Institute in Basic Life Principles. So I, of course, and everyone else wanted us to do a deep dive into your story, what it was like growing up in the IBLP and how they really just smashed your dreams growing up as a child with big goals of going to Juilliard and all of the goals that you had wanted to reach as a child. So let's just start at the beginning. Can you talk a little bit about your family, maybe how strict they were and the different rules that were implemented in your home?
My parents actually started me off homeschooled, so I have never been to school. At that time, I think I was 4-ish, they started with a preschool curriculum, homeschool curriculum, Becca Books, which some of your listeners may be familiar with, very conservative, religious publisher of homeschool curriculum down in Florida. But I actually think things were like pretty lax in those early days, not as intense as they would get when I was around 12 years old and my parents joined ATI, the Advanced Training Institute, which was Bill Gothard's homeschool program. For me, things kind of went from bad to worse. I have many happy memories of my early childhood before IBLP. But my parents had attended his basic Institute in Basic Life Principles seminar, and then the advanced seminar. And from there, they followed through to the kind of the third phase of Bill Gothard's program, which was the homeschool program.
Okay, so for those who aren't familiar, can you talk a little bit about the umbrella of authority? And did your house really change? Was it already a pretty patriarchal structure with strict gender roles, or was there really a big switch after that seminar?
There was a slow, gradual shift as we slowly learned more and more. Once we joined his homeschool program, Bill Gothard's homeschool program, we attended the big conferences in Knoxville, Tennessee as a family, where we would hear, his fresh insights from God, new things that he'd learned. And so it was really kind of a slow indoctrination. And I felt like every summer we'd learn new rules that God wanted us to abide by. So I think of it as like adding brick by brick, this increasing weight on me as, I learned more, as he came out with more rules, more guidelines, more secrets to living a godly, successful life. Also, I was 12 when we first joined, so I wasn't super aware, but definitely by the time I was mid to late teens, that level of, control and oppression had really grown. Pre-IBLP, pre-ATI, there wasn't a lot of, I don't think there was any talk of umbrella of authority or anything like that. That was pretty brand new. I was supposed to obey my parents and they punished me if I didn't obey, but Bill Gothard's chain of authority, that was really a new concept, that the father was over the wife, who was over the children, and then you have the police over the local government, and then all the way up to God. And really his idea, this very scary concept, which he would illustrate, is that if you stepped out from under that umbrella of authority, you opened yourself up to the direct attacks of Satan. Now, as a kid, that's scary. That's I would lay awake in bed as a young kid, afraid of that, desperately fearful. So that was new. And that really, I think, began to change things. And where there were so many rules, there was rules about what type of music you listened to. All of a sudden we learned, or were told, that pop music was satanic. He had this whole teaching on music with offbeats was bad. Music that faded away at the end was sensual.
Sensual?
Yeah.
And the crescendo is sensual?
There's even some teachings where secular music loosens the bowels and increases sensuality. It's really funny to read now.
Yeah.
But we were genuinely concerned about it. And I remember covering our ears and running out of a restaurant or a grocery store if the pop music was really loud and sounded extra satanic.
Oh my God.
The Duggars on Shiny Happy People talk about their Nike code word, where if there was a woman dressed immodestly, one of the girls in the Duggar family would say Nike, which was referring to Nike shoes, and the boys were supposed to look down at their shoes until it was safe to look up. Our family adopted that too. I think we just called them, I think our code word was more like sneakers or tennis shoes. But that was code to look down at your shoes. There was a woman that was not dressed in a godly, appropriate way. We were not allowed to go through checkout lines at grocery stores because of all the
magazines?
Sinful magazine covers.
Oh.
So I remember going through a grocery store with my mom, and then she would send us around to wait for her while she went through a grocery store checkout. So yeah, the rules just piled on.
So your family was pretty strict. And also for context, I don't think even what I'm wearing would be considered modest, right? Because there's a V-neck that points to my chest.
Yeah, I mean, I should be looking at my sneakers right now.
Cover your eyes. Yeah, so questions about that, because it is so heavily gender specific as far as the men do this and the women need to procreate and all of that. So at what age did you realize that you were attracted to men? Because I feel like that would start conflicting right around that time that your family's going through that big shift.
Yeah. We joined IBLP when I was 10. Oh, I said 12, 10. We joined IBLP when I was 10, or ATI, the Advanced Training Institute. When I was 10, I would say sometime around the age of 12, I saw a Calvin Klein billboard, and that was the moment. That was realization for me.
Yeah.
I didn't have words for it. I didn't know what that was. I just recognized attraction, and I kind of knew like to keep it to myself, like not to say anything about it. But I think that was more because any sensual attraction was wrong. So I think at that age, I was like, well, whether it's a guy or a girl, it probably doesn't matter. It's just bad. You know, this is a bad thing. So I didn't talk about that at all. But that would have been like the first indication. But again, I had no words for it. You know, my family, we didn't have a TV. We didn't have secular friends. You know, we really only played with other Bill Gothard homeschool kids. And so I hadn't really heard the word gay or homosexuality. I was not really familiar with this. I remember like hearing my parents whisper about it, or like overhearing them and thinking like, oh, whatever that is, that's bad. Like, I don't know what it is, but that sounds bad. And then one day as we were working through Bill Gothard's wisdom booklets, his self-published, self-written curriculum that was supposed to teach you everything you needed to know by following scripture. And I remember one time we studied Sodom and Gomorrah, and that was the first time I heard about sodomites. And I wasn't making the connection. I just thought like, wow, these people are really bad. Like God destroyed an entire city, all the women and children, all the livestock, like everything because of what some guys did. And I just thought, well, I'm a good kid. Like I obey my parents. I try to do everything correctly. Like whatever that is, I can't be that because I'm a good kid.
Yeah, I know that feeling of you hear about all the horrible things that could happen to you because I grew up Mormon. So don't do this, don't do that, cover your shoulders, be modest. And then you just think, well, that other thing will never happen to me because I'm doing it right.
Yeah.
And then you get older and you realize, oh, this is kind of hard to follow all these rules. And then you start to think, oh my gosh, are all those bad things going to happen to me? Did that ever catch up with you?
Yeah. As I got older into my like late teens, I remember this growing dichotomy inside me, like realizing that I was gay, still not wanting to admit it to myself, but this growing tension of like, how's this going to work? Like, this can't work. What am I going to do? I mean, still hoping that I was going to meet a woman and fall in love with her and marry and have kids, you know, as many kids as possible. And I remember just thinking like, oh, the right girl hasn't come along. That'll eventually happen. But that was just wishful thinking on my part.
Yeah. So let's go back to your childhood a little bit, because music is such an important part. And you touched on how certain music was forbidden and even you're running out of restaurants to avoid it. But music is such a big part of your life. So it started well before IBLP when you were 3. Did any of that have to shift? Did your perspective of music shift as you went into IBLP? Or, I mean, violin is pretty mundane. They even allow it in Mormon churches as far as like beautiful church music. So I can't imagine that it would be too changed or you'd have to shift things. But was there a shift there?
Yeah, I think one of the big shifts was really the restriction and limitations on what type of music we were supposed to listen to, because they even got into what classical composers you should or shouldn't listen to.
Oh, whoa.
I mean, Tchaikovsky, for example, is known to have been gay. And I remember discussions around whether it was appropriate to listen to his music or not. There was another composer, I can't think of his name right now, but his last name was, I think it's Warlock. And I remember one year discussions around him, like, was he a witch? Should we be listening or playing his music?
Because of his last name?
Yeah. So it kind of became more and more restrictive.
Yeah.
Bill Gothard really encouraged classical instruments and especially violin. I think he loved violin, and we were encouraged to like perform for conferences. We even, my brother and sister and I even got to perform for the big Knoxville conference. I don't know, maybe there was like 40,000 people there, 60, I have no clue, but it was a huge, huge arena filled with people. And we got to play a medley of hymns, because that was really the only Christian music you should listen to, were good old-fashioned hymns. No, none of this Christian rock music, none of this secular modern praise choruses. Those are just, satanic music dressed up for Christians. Mm-hmm. So it was a hymn medley. And that was really, really encouraged. And Bill Gothard even had a 2-week music course at one of his training centers called Sound Encounters. And we attended that every year. And that's where the discussions of like, should we be listening to Tchaikovsky? Should we be performing Tchaikovsky? What about this Warlock suite that we were, actually we had been playing every summer because it was written for a string orchestra. And, and finally one of the conductors, who was an ATI father, was like, I don't think we should be doing this anymore. So it was like encouraged as a way to like spread godly music, but also was increasingly restrictive. Now, our family didn't go that far because we had just regular violin teachers, not homeschooled ATI violin teachers who were assigning us just regular classical music. So yeah, there's some areas where we didn't really go along with it, but like definitely when we were there for the Sound Encounters 2-week summer camp every year, like you definitely didn't mention some classical composers.
Wow, that's so interesting that it was limited even in that way. So music is such a beautiful way to it's like meditation, really, just getting lost in the music. Mine was dancing. So I'm wondering for you, growing up in this strict environment, isolated, the Shiny Happy People talks about how it turns every father into a cult leader and every household into an island, and you literally lived on an island. So was music an escape for you, or was it just a passion?
Definitely both. I mean, it was an escape in the sense that it was my outlet beyond the control of IBLP. I think without music, I probably would have lost hope. I wouldn't have had anything that expanded my life outside of just the cult of our family. Mm-hmm. My parents, they allowed me to go to secular summer camps, chamber music festivals. I got to work with some of the best teachers alive at the time, and even teachers from across the world, some of the most famous names. And so that was really kind of an escape. We'd go for 2 weeks to this music festival, and I'd get to interact with people and play music and work with teachers. And so that was a not ATI approved activity that we got to do because of music. And even just getting to see a regular violin teacher once a week, someone who was not indoctrinated in all of that, and work with someone, just a normal person. And it's funny, they would even comment. I remember one of my teachers, one of my violin teachers, as I was getting older, kind of recognizing that I was a little brainwashed, a little indoctrinated in the way that I would use the word we. So he would ask me a question about myself, and I would always say, well, we blah, blah, blah. Well, we do this. He's like, well, what's your favorite hobbies outside of violin? I'd say, well, we like to, as in my family. And I remember him saying, like, is there anything that you like to do? Like, what about just you? And I was just confused at the time. I was like, well, he's just being nosy. I'm here for music. Like, shut up. But now I realize, like, oh, he could see something was wrong, and he was trying to like nudge me to like have some autonomy and think outside of the little cult group, which was my family. But I just saw that as like this nosy secular atheist is trying to interfere.
Yeah, I love that was your peek into the secular world, and that you had that available option to you, and that your parents weren't closed-minded enough to completely shut you off from that. And I think it's so beautiful that you had that opportunity to kind of see what the world had to offer. And because of that, you were about to go to Juilliard. So let's talk about that.
At one of these secular music festivals, I played for a conductor who was from New York City. And he went to my mom and dad afterwards and he said, I can get Matthew into the pre-collegiate division at Juilliard.
Wow.
And I forget if I was 12, 12. I guess it was right around 12.
Wow, so young.
And he was like, it's set up, Juilliard set up for this. Matthew can move out. You guys could move out with them, or you could just send him out. And I remember I was not part of the discussion. I could kind of overhear it, but I was like or 14. Maybe I was 14. I get my ages mixed up, but I could hear them having this conversation. And I just thought like, oh, wow, my life is about to change. I might be going to Juilliard. And it felt like both scary, but exciting. And I was just like so pleased that this conductor liked my playing enough to say this. But I also remember thinking like, it's, in a day or two, I'll probably just be told what's happening, not asked. I knew I would not be asked, and I was not asked. And I just remember being told like, that's not the right thing to do. It'd be wrong to send off someone your age by yourself, ungodly influences. And, my family couldn't move to New York City to like help me do that.
Yeah, to keep you under the umbrella.
Yeah, to keep me under the umbrella and protect me from all those dangerous, sinful
Juilliard artists.
New York City is probably the devil's city,
Right.
And interesting enough, I think a little bit, just a year or two later, I got the same offer to attend the pre-collegiate division of Indiana State, also known as Bloomington. And they had the second most famous teacher at the time who I probably would have been able to study with eventually, but they had a very famous teacher who taught pre-collegiate. So it was like you'd go from her to him and you'd be like have studied with the best. And again, that was turned down. I don't remember the details around that again, but by that stage, I was a little older, and at that time, I definitely felt, I think, sad, depressed, a little let down, thinking like, wow, here's these amazing opportunities. And, the first time, I was pretty young. I was like, okay, whatever. I was too young to really process and understand what is being offered. It just sounded exciting. But by the second one, I was beginning to feel like, oh, I may never have the chance to do with my music what I should. I'm going to have to find a good music conservatory to like continue. And it's the only thing I'm good at. It's my only passion. It was really my identity in the sense that like nothing else really felt like it was working in life. And Bill Gothard's homeschool program is just absolute crap. But yet here was this one thing that I could do. I was good at. I was winning awards. It was the one thing where I was so proud of my accomplishments, and nothing else in life was I proud of. Sharing with people outside of ATI about my family and the rules and the cult or homeschool program was embarrassing, and a sense of shame because I knew it was just weird and bizarre. But my accomplishments in music were one source of pride for me. And by the time I was college age, there were 2 local schools in Kansas City that I auditioned for, and both gave me full ride scholarships for music.
Wow.
And now I'm down to like schools that I know are like, they're no good for music. This is not where you go to have a music career, but at least it was a possibility. And those, again, it was no.
So they didn't even allow that, a local college. Was it because it's higher learning or just because of the school itself?
Higher learning, all higher learning was discouraged. Bill Gothard was very anti-college. College is where children went to be secularized and taught the ways of the world
Well,
and have,
he's not wrong.
yeah.
That's where you learn things.
So I remember my parents said, the only thing we'll let you do is the orchestra. You can go play in the orchestra, the college orchestra, and you can attend a private lesson. And they somehow worked it out with the school that I could do those two things. But I was driven to school to attend class. And then one of my parents was waiting outside. I would walk out, get in the car, and incredibly embarrassing.
I was just gonna say that oh man, even getting dropped off at high school is painful, right?
Yeah. And here I was at college being picked up and dropped off by my parents. And it was also very discouraging for me because the orchestra, this wasn't a conservatory. This was not kids that wanted a career in music. So most of them were playing, and had their textbooks open on their laps or on the floor. I was like, oh, that's where their priority is. They just on their other classes. So it was very discouraging. It was not rewarding to even do that part. My teacher there was very good. I loved him. He was an incredible musician, incredible teacher. Yeah, that was really the only good thing out of that.
Did they ever send you to any of the training facilities, any of Bill Gothard's facilities?
Yeah, I've been to Indianapolis Training Center for the Music Sound Encounters course. I briefly visited the North Woods where his paramilitary camps started. They eventually moved down to his Big Sandy location, which I've also spent time at. I was not part of Alert. I didn't sign up for that at all. Thank God my parents didn't enroll me in that. That would have been hell. I've been to the Tulsa Training Center because when we lived in Kansas City, that was close. I think we went there for, I don't know, volunteer work or maybe the occasional Children's Institute conference. I've been to Dallas, the Dallas Training Center once or twice.
Wow.
I was sent to Chicago to the headquarters for a week or two to volunteer. And I was just like low man on the totem pole. I was shrink wrapping. I was in charge of the shrink wrap machine for like his wisdom books that came off the press when returns came, I think it was my job to re-shrink wrap returns that came back. Yeah, so I did that for a week and I was like, this is awful. And I never saw Bill Gothard there, but I could really tell that there was a real hierarchy, a pecking order to like who was his favorites and who was not and who's who. And, I realized that I was a nobody and I really hated that particular stay. And while I was there, I still had to practice my 3 hours a day. So I was waking up at 4 a.m. to practice, get in practice before 8, I think it was, or 7 when we had to be at breakfast.
Whoa.
So yeah, it was intense.
Yeah. So did you ever meet Bill Gothard? I think you said you had played for him. What was your opinion of Bill?
So I played for him in the sense that at the huge conference,
Got it.
big homeschool conference at Knoxville, we were invited, my siblings and I, to come up and play, for him, but for everybody. My encounters with him, he always seemed kind of fake. Like he had this like put on persona, this veneer of like the charismatic leader. And at the time I thought like, oh, he encounters like 1,000 people a day that he has to like, put on the right personality for. And I just thought like, oh, I'm just not important. I'm not a somebody. So, I'll just get the kind of like the handshake, the fake smile, and kind of the dead eyes. I could definitely see his favorites. I did some international traveling with him and a group of people.
Oh.
Like I went to Taiwan and Singapore and Australia and New Zealand on kind of mission trips. And he was some of them. And he loved blonde girls, like girls that look like Barbie dolls. He was, I do remember there being little whispers among the other ATI students, like about his favorites and his type. I remember I had a friend and she was not his type. And I remember her having some snide comments to make about who Bill Gothard's favorites were. I just thought she was jealous at the time. But as I saw more and more of it, I realized like, oh yeah, he does have a type. And he really is attracted to that. He would even tell girls to like curl their hair, put big curlers in their hair, because he liked girls with like big soft curls. And yeah, so that was interesting really to see like, oh, he has favorites and the favorites get close to him, and I'm not.
And let me clarify, this is a grown man whose quote favorites are teenagers, which makes it so gross.
Oh,
He was
yeah.
clearly preying on them. I mean, we've had women on the channel who have personally been preyed on by Bill Gothard. It's disgusting. So the fact that there's actually this environment of, oh, I'm not his favorite, in the sense of they want to be a favorite because that means special treatment or feeling like a prophet of God or whatever loves you. It's just, ooh, it's so backwards and creepy.
Yeah, I realize now that a lot of his guidelines on about how a woman should dress or wear her hair or makeup or colors or style, I think a significant portion of it was just what he was sexually attracted to.
Yeah.
Mixed in with like what needed to be godly. But that's really creepy to think that he could like dictate to all these women to kind of like look in a way that he was more sexually attracted to.
Yeah. Thousands of women all over the world.
Yeah.
It's so gross.
Yeah.
So, wow, I didn't know you even traveled internationally. That's so interesting. You were in it, am I remembering correctly, well into your 20s? You were still involved?
Yes. Yeah. I could have been free from it because my dad almost killed Bill Gothard.
I'm sorry, what? What happened there?
My dad reminds me of this. He's like, we could have been free from all of this. So one time my dad was at one of the training centers. I can't remember which one. Maybe it was Arkansas. And Bill Gothard needed to go to the airport. And so they asked my dad to drive Bill Gothard to the airport. Now, my dad is blind in one eye and lacks depth perception. So when he's driving a car, it can be a harrowing experience. So especially when he's trying to change lanes and he like can't really see if someone's over on this side, and he does his best. So he almost crashed into another car as they're barreling down the highway, trying to get Bill Gothard to the airport. And he told me, he's like, I almost killed him.
Just casually says that. Your dad's not in anymore, I'm assuming?
No, he's not. No,
Okay.
he my parents divorced.
Okay.
And he got out very shortly after that because, his whole life had fallen apart. Everything he thought was going to work out really just crumbled around him. And, it took him a couple of years after that, but it made him rethink every decision he'd made in life. And so he was really the first to kind of see the light.
Interesting, because it's usually the women who go first because of all the control over women. So that's great that your dad had that sense that something was off. So you were in well into your 20s. What was it that made you think, you know what, I can't take this anymore. I need to take control of my life and escape literally out the window?
Yeah, so I had a journal there where I had been kind of writing about this growing dichotomy, tension between who I was, as a gay man and the oppressive religion I was in. And I was really pouring my heart out into this. It was like my one sense, I didn't have anybody to talk to. So I was just really pouring out my hurt, my anger, my resentment, my sadness into this journal. And it was a thick journal, and I'd filled it. And I remember thinking, this is incredibly valuable to me. Like, this represents so much like pain and thought and tears and heartache and then a lot of like it was in this journal that I came out to myself.
No,
and it was such a beautiful thing. So I duct taped that journal to the underside of my dresser. So you'd have to reach your hand under and then like up like 6 inches to like find a book duct taped to the underside. At this time, I was still playing my violin, performing with a couple of orchestras. And so I was going to be out of town for an extended weekend for some concerts. So while I was gone, my mom called me up and she's like, I found your journal, and I read the whole thing.
Oh.
And I kind of knew like everything was over. Like it was all over. After that, I lost privilege to a cell phone because we didn't have individual cell phones. We were kind of like allowed to use cell phones. So I lost phone use, computer use. We didn't have computers. There was one family computer with a password that was locked. So if you wanted to use the computer, you asked, my mom would go enter in the password, and then you could sit down and do what you had said you were going to do. And then don't spend too long there. And then the computer would be relocked. So I lost access to the computer. And then I also lost access to the car. Again, we did not have cars. There was a family car or two. And we were like allowed to use the car in certain situations. And then in other situations, we would just be dropped off, like I was at college. So I lost access to those. And I really knew that like, the end was nigh, the end was in sight. And my mom asked me to go to a reparative therapy, conversion therapy conference.
Oh.
And I agreed to bide time because I knew like I needed a certain amount of time to get things in order so that I could leave.
Yeah. Can I pause for a second here and just validate how wrong it is that you are being punished, essentially, for being who you are? It's almost as if you've done something wrong, like you stole the car and now you're being punished for it. But it's simply who you are. The deepest part of your soul has been exposed. So your vulnerabilities are just on the table and now you're being punished for it. I'm so sorry. That must have been heartbreaking to handle that and to understand the way that your mom is treating you after this.
Yeah, thank you. It was really earth-shattering. I kind of knew that would be the reaction, but experiencing it was like one of the darkest points in my life.
Yeah.
So, I went to the conversion reparative therapy conference just to buy time because I knew I needed to buy a car, I needed to get myself a laptop, and I needed to get myself a cell phone so I could survive on my own. And yet at the conference, like no one was repaired. That was what shocked me.
I mean, obviously, hindsight, of course. Did you think that it might actually sway you in any sort of way?
I didn't think it would sway me, but I thought like, well, maybe I'll see examples of people who've been fixed.
Wow. Even just using the word fixed is wild because you're not broken. What are the things that they're telling you at this conference?
Well, I walked up to the front doors of this conference center and like, I almost turned around, but I was like, no, I gotta do it. I walk in purposely late because I don't want to talk to anybody. And the conference is going. And so I like try to slip into the back row far away from other people because I was like, I don't want to sit next to people. I walk in and I realize that I'm probably the youngest person there. And I felt like every head swiveled around and like stared at me. And I was like, oh no, this is not what I wanted. I mean, it's basically, we heard one sad testimony after another of guys who like were married to women and sad and unhappy, but trying to make it work. And guys who had decided to be single and celibate and were struggling with that. It was just like there was no happy stories. It was all like heartbreak and heartache and people failing to try to do whatever it was they were trying to do. And then, during like breaks between sessions and lunch breaks and all everyone did was like hit on me. And I'm like, wait, guys, what's going on? Like, aren't we here like to get repaired? Like, and like, we're all just like hitting on each other. Like what's going on?
You're irresistible, Matthew.
You're flirting with me. I had never been flirted with in my life. And so it was really overwhelming to have like, get in the lunch line and like three guys were all like hitting me up and flirting with me. And I'm like, no, this is not what we're here for.
Yeah.
So I even started to avoid meals because I was like, I can't handle this. I was a virgin at this time. I was like, had never done anything. And I actually did meet one guy close to my age who I got along with. And we just kind of became buddies. And he was really like saving grace for me there, because he just explained everything to me. He's like, no one's repaired, no one's fixed. We're all just like trying to make it work. But he was like, he told me what, his lifestyle. And I was like, oh, you're not even trying to be repaired. And so I got home from that, and my mother was like, what was that like? And I was like, I don't know. Like, no one is repaired. They just either say, they just blame outside factors. So she was like, well, read this book. It's the book called Battle for Normality. And I read that again to buy more time. Cause like by now I'd purchased a car and gotten a cell phone and a laptop, but I needed a place to go. I needed to find someone who would let me stay in their room.
Mm-hmm.
So I read the book, and she was like, and I was like, so it says you had an over-involved mom, you had a absent father, you were not popular at school, and you're bad at sports.
And that's what makes you gay?
That's what makes you gay. But there's no answers other than be celibate and try hard.
Yeah.
And I said, even if those 4 things were true, which they're not, because like I was popular at school. I was like the bully and the oldest one at school. And sports, the sports that we did were just like sports that our family played, like ping pong and volleyball and tennis and things like that. And I was the best one at them because I was older than my brother and sister. So I was the best on the team. So, I just remember saying to her, like, even if all 4 things were true, there's still no answers. It's not giving you anything. And so at that point she said, I want you to start seeing weekly a counselor who does reparative therapy, conversion therapy. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. Like, that's not going to happen. I was like, they don't have answers. Like, I'm not going to do this. And that caused a huge fight, and a really epic fight. And I realized that like it was over. And if I was going to leave with any possessions, I needed to do it fast. Like I knew if I announced right then, I'm leaving, I would have been escorted to the door without a single possession of my own and just like kicked out. So I quickly went to my room, grabbed my violin and a bag of stuff that I had prepared, slid my bedroom door open, jumped out of it, ran to the car, drove off, and never returned.
Wow. That same day of the fight.
Yeah. Oh, a window, not a door. I climbed out the window. Did I say door? Yeah.
Yeah. But I knew what you meant.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot emotionally too, because you had siblings still at home and you've recently posted about getting one of them out as well. Was that really hard for you? I mean, obviously you're in fight or flight mode. You want to survive. You need to do this for you. And that comes with a lot of probably guilt or sibling guilt or recognizing that you're leaving your entire life behind.
Incredible guilt. Feeling like I'd abandoned everybody, abandoned my siblings who must hate me. I'd abandoned my family that I was supposed to be there for. And guilt about religion. I mean, guilt that I was going to be eternally damned in the flames of hell. I remember having like horrible nightmares for months after that, where I would just wake up in intense fear, panic, feeling like, I'd done the wrong thing. I'd made a terrible, terrible mistake. But also knowing that like I couldn't go back. So really feeling stuck. It was, I was in shell shock. I was deeply traumatized. I felt like a war victim who had come out of a bunker and like didn't even recognize the world I was in, because I was now in the normal world, the secular world, for the first time. And, I remember my people asking me simple things like, oh, what's your favorite color? And realizing that I didn't even know what color I liked, because I knew what color I should like. I knew what like Bill Gothard or my parents, like I knew what the right thing to say, but I didn't actually know what color I liked. I didn't even know if I had a favorite color. I knew what colors I was dressed in a lot. And it really took a very long time to like figure out who I was, figure out what I liked. Did I like it? Even the violin. I remember going through a period of like, do I actually like the violin, or was that the
Wow.
only thing I was good at? Was it I was made to play it since I was 3. Obviously I was good at it. I loved it. It was a passion, but I questioned it. I was like, do I even love this, or is it just the only thing that's got me through? And I actually stopped playing for 2 years. And I was like, I don't know if I love the violin. And so I stopped playing. And 2 years later, I realized, oh, I do love the violin. I miss the violin. That's real. But I needed that to figure out
Mhm.
if I loved it. And it was quite, and I was surviving at this time on teaching violin. So I was teaching violin students and earning income. And so it was, I just had to decide. I had to figure out, like, is this what I love? So it was a huge transitioning time. Thankfully, I sought out some really good therapists. I love the DBT, dialectic behavior therapy, also lifespan integration therapy. It's just an incredible way of like developing tools and then also going back and healing all of those past traumas.
Yeah.
And I've been in therapy for about 15 years with the same guy who is incredible. I love him to death. He has seen me through every imaginable scenario. And he often reminds me like how much progress I've made, because sometimes I can forget that I have come so far, and I'll say something. He'll be like, wow, Matthew, do you remember when you would have done this instead of that? Do you remember when you would have been, saying this to me? And now listen to what you just said. He'll say, you've made so much progress. And it just like overwhelms me in those moments, that affirmation and then that love and that support, that sometimes I'll just break down right there, just feeling like, wow, I survived. I've come so far. I've done the work. I have, healed so much through just diligently seeking out, experts who can really, really help me. And, there's still more to do, but it is really encouraging sometimes to look back and see who I've become compared to, the poor, confused young Matthew that left that cult.
Yeah. And how you described it is so perfect, because you have to really deconstruct everything. I always say it's like a Jenga puzzle. You're pulling pieces out while you're deconstructing, but it's not until you completely knock down the tower and start from scratch that you can really figure out who you are and what you want to do with your life, and really distinguish your thoughts from the cult's thoughts, from just what you were programmed with, and understand the core of you. And that takes a lot of reprogramming and trying out new things and doing the scary things, pushing the boundaries that you were never allowed to push before, and maybe go too far and then pull it back. But it's all under your control and you're the one deciding. It's powerful and scary and all of the above. And I know we're short on time, so I want to talk about how you met Paul. Maybe we could bring him on and you guys can talk about it together.
Yeah, let's get Paul on here.
Okay.
Hello.
Paul,
Hi.
it's so nice to
So
meet
great
you.
to meet you.
I have one of your books right here for my baby. She loves it. I love your work. You guys are so sweet together. It just warms my soul every time you post. I'm like, oh, what's it going to be this time?
Aw, thank you so much.
So thank you for the light that you guys bring into the world together.
Thank you.
So I want to hear from both of you what it was like when you met. We've talked about the sexual repression. We've talked about the horrible attempt at a reconversion or a conversion therapy camp. I want to know when it was for you, Matthew, that you fully opened your heart to Paul. Was Paul the first love, or did you experiment beforehand? Sorry, Paul. And what happened when you found each other and you allowed yourself to grow into this beautiful relationship?
Yeah, so I had a few boyfriends before Paul.
And one in particular who was so crucial to the transition period too.
Yes.
Somebody who was very patient with you.
Yeah, my
that
first
time.
boyfriend, he and I were together for about 4.5 years, and he was incredibly understanding and patient. I would not have put up
Mm.
with myself back then, but he did. He took me in. He just helped me out in every way possible. Incredibly understanding, and really helped me through those initial years of just trying to like resort out who I was and what I wanted and what I liked.
Yeah.
That relationship didn't end up working, and I had a couple more after that that also didn't work
Shorter term.
shorter term,
Yeah.
because I was still trying to figure out, I'd never dated before.
Can I just say, I'm so glad I didn't get Matthew straight out of the cult. Like, I'm so grateful to those men who came before me.
Yeah.
I know their names. I thank them every night before I go to bed because that was such a necessary time for Matthew, and it was so complicated.
Yeah.
And obviously before I met Matthew, I had relationships that you learn a lot when you.
Yeah,
but so we were
it's-
ready to meet each other.
It's a good thing I got a lot of my practice and mistakes out of the way.
Yeah, I think
first.
that's how that works a lot of the time. For me too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
how did you meet?
Well, we met online.
We met online.
Nice.
in
Yeah.
Canada. So we were on a dating site type thing, and Matthew slipped into my Instagram DMs because he was
Nice.
stalking me. And well, you tell this story better than I do, this part.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I was looking, and I found this guy, and his profile just looked so interesting. I mean, besides being very attractive and handsome, he was an artist painting these beautiful, surreal paintings. He had just ran a marathon, which I was like, wow, that's super athletic. And seemed like he had a very healthy lifestyle, because like every other picture on his Instagram was a green smoothie that he
God,
concocted.
this is back in the Instagram days where you're constantly photographing your lunch.
Oh yeah, I've been there.
Yeah.
And then he was like legally blind. And I was like, whoa, wait, what?
Right.
How did he run the marathon? How's he painting? So I had so many questions.
And it's so funny because we started chatting on this dating app, and I didn't know he'd already been like sleuthing actually in
Your
my
Instagram?
So I didn't know he even knew about my blindness yet, because I wasn't in my dating profile, since that's sort of
Oh.
something I choose to only tell people once I feel like, okay, I feel comfortable with this person. I don't think if you have a disability, you need to put that on in your dating profile. I think that's sort of, it's something that you need to disclose with somebody that you trust a little bit. So once we'd had like a conversation, I was like, oh, this guy's smart. He seems really genuine. I'm going to let him know about my blindness. And so I said, hey, I have this eye disease called retinitis pigmentosa. And then he ghosted me. No reply. I was like, okay, there we go. And I went to bed that night thinking, well, been there, done that. He's not the first guy to ghost me after I dropped that bombshell. And I woke up the next morning, and there was this incredibly long, thoughtful reply from him. And he explained that when I had sent the message, he was just his girlfriend, a girlfriend of his was picking him up, and they were going out. So that was why he didn't reply immediately. I had the most thoughtful, researched reply. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay, this guy's like, not only is he didn't ghost me, he's motivated to learn about it, and he's interested. And I thought that was really cool. So that was really heartwarming. However, he lived in America and I was in Canada, and I was like, I'm not dating an American. So, but then here's the clincher. At this point, I'd only really seen these very like nice photographs of him. These like very like beach shots and things like that. And I was like, boy, this guy, okay. Then he sent me a video clip of him playing the violin. And that's when I was like, okay, you should have led with this. You should have led with it. Why didn't you lead with this? He was on stage with Andrea Bocelli at a concert. He was playing with this incredible opera singer. And I was like, okay, all right, now I have to meet you. And so he kind of tricked me into it. He was like, well, I'll drive up to Canada and I'll give you a violin lesson if you give me a painting lesson, because I was, as Matthew mentioned, I'm a painter. So that was our first date.
Yeah. And it was a lunch date, because it's easier for Paul to see during the day, more light. So I drove up just before lunch. He had a green smoothie waiting for me.
I did. It was
cute.
chilled.
And I played violin for him. He taught me, he gave me this great tutorial on how to paint trees. It was so much fun.
You did a great job.
Thank
And
you,
I
thank you.
butchered Twinkle Twinkle. It was awful. But then Matthew played this like Mendelssohn violin concerto for me. I think now, I mean, he was really trying to impress me because it's a very difficult piece. And he was standing in my living room, and I have a tiny bit of vision at the center of my eye. I have 95% of my vision is lost. So I was standing far back enough that I could just kind of appreciate the whole picture. And I was just stunned. I was like, I don't know who this person's going to be in my life. I don't know what will become of us, but I want him to be in my life because this is an incredible human being.
Oh.
He's so talented, so genuine. So there was a magic about him instantly, an electricity to be in his presence that you just so rarely encounter in life. It's one of those sparks that comes along so rarely. And at the end of our date, which lasted 20 hours, we stayed up all night talking.
Oh my
He drove
gosh.
home. He drove home the next morning. And I wrote in my journal, I think I just met my husband. And I kept that a secret, and I didn't tell him about that until our wedding vows 3 years later. So I read that journal entry.
Oh, that's so sweet. I love that, you guys. Wow. And one of the things that's so apparent from your profile is how both of you really, truly support each other. Matthew supporting Paul with his art, and Paul supporting Matthew with his music. And a question for you, Paul, because we're talking about his upbringing. Has anything come up in your relationship that you've had to support him in extra ways, or kind of show him the worldly way of things, the secular way
Oh
of
my
things?
God. Do I ever? I mean, like, you don't even know. You don't even understand. I'm here like I was raised by a TV set. Okay. I was like, I am a pop culture junkie and like a film buff. And so like, imagine me talking about like, casually talking about Friends or Jennifer Aniston. And he's like,
Sure.
huh? What's that? Like, I've never heard of that. Well, you don't know the most popular television show of all time. Like, I can't, I'm like, the re-education on just TV and movies has been kind of delightful because it's sort of fun for me, to like show him stuff, because he never watched anything from like past the 1960s, like when censorship, anyway, it was a different time. And he's like, he only watched these big box musicals from like the 1950s. I'm like, okay, we need to catch you up on a lot. So that was interesting. And then another piece for me, it probably was just learning that because of Matthew's experience, he processed his emotions differently. And that took time for me to really adjust to. I'm somebody who, like, something happens to me, I know instantly if that hurt my feelings, if I'm sad, if it made me happy, like everything's like, right, it's happening in real time. And I realized because of Matthew's life, this is changed over the course of our relationship, but especially in the early years, his emotions could take hours or sometimes even days to fully process until it would be days later and he would be angry about something. I'm like, well, all of a sudden, why are you angry? And then it was something that had happened a couple days earlier, and he finally realized he made him mad or upset. And I was like, I'm just not like, that was a real shock to me to live with somebody who had to process things so slowly. And I realized that was really because of the cult.
In the cult, there was no room for emotions, negative emotions, to be expressed. You were supposed to have a pleasant smile, a glowing countenance, a godly sparkle to your eyes at all times, and you just didn't express anything negative. So having suppressed that for so long, I didn't know my feelings. I just would struggle with them. And then even when I did know them, sometimes they would take a while for them to like develop and for me to figure out. I'd be like, oh, what is this feeling? And I wouldn't even know. I'd be like, this is a negative feeling, but I don't even know which one. Hopefully, in a couple of hours, a couple of days, I'll figure that out. And then finally I would be like, oh, I'm feeling this. Okay. And then I would be able to express it and talk about it. But yeah, that was a direct result of just years, like an entire childhood of like never being safe to express any negative emotion.
But to Matthew's credit, he's an excellent communicator. And yeah, you talk everything out with me. You're willing to talk and read and and seek good advice. Obviously, getting therapy. I mean, in Matthew didn't mention this, but a really interesting part of his story is that before his family got into the cult, like his mother, one of her pieces of advice, a sort of a mantra that she followed through life, was to always to seek professionals in their field, find people who are experts in their field. And that was something that your mom instilled in you at a very young age. And of course, that completely changed under Bill Gothard's rule. It was like, don't seek any experts other than Bill Gothard. But what was fascinating about that is I don't think Matthew ever forgot that. So as soon as he escaped the cult, the first thing he did was, I need to find an expert in their field. And that was like, find a good therapist, Yeah. And that saved you, I think.
Yeah, I think you brought up something so important about not feeling safe enough to feel your emotions and just how crucial that is once you leave a cult, because you can't just leave and then I'm fine now. I can just feel emotions, because the body truly does keep the score. And if you're not in a place, you're still in a fight or flight mode when you're leaving a cult. You're still trying to figure out what reality is. And so figuring out how to ground yourself, figuring out how to feel safe enough to feel your feelings is such an overlooked thing, in my opinion. So I love that you found that safety within Paul, safety within your relationship, and even within yourself through however many years of therapy that has allowed you to slowly feel through those feelings in a very physical way so that it can catch up to you mentally and you can process it there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a incredible journey, a rough journey. It's had its ups and downs, but yeah, I really credit just a lot of life integration work because the body remembers, the body has memory. The body remembers these times, and it's so easy for some little event to re-trigger some real trauma from childhood. And anyone who's been up in a cult, has probably been traumatized over and over and over. It takes time and work to undo that, to let the body know, to let our younger selves know that like, we're okay now. We're safe now.
Yeah.
An example of that, it was like early in our relationship, Matthew would do like some sort of music related excursion. He played in little orchestras and such. And then he would come home and I would be there, and he was so different. Like he was so guarded and so closed down. And I realized, like, much like he told in his story, he would do these weekends and then come home, and it was just a really scary place to come back to because he was reintegrating into the cult from one of these excursions. And so he would be very shut down, closed off, guarded, and he still was carrying that in his adult life. Like, coming home isn't safe after I've been out playing music. And that was something that just we had to work on and like let thaw and realize like, you weren't even consciously doing it. No. It's just how you return from one of these things. Yeah.
Wow. That's a great example. Did you choose to make contact with your mother again down the road?
I have had a little contact with her, and ultimately it didn't go well. So we're not in contact anymore.
She's left the cult, but she still
retains
all the sort of the indoctrination is still all there.
Yeah.
And so that's made it really impossible to have a relationship.
Yeah. My mom and my sister, unfortunately, have kind of retained a lot of the beliefs, but thankfully my dad and my brother have not. They're kind of on the other side.
Oh man, it's so heartbreaking. I'm glad that you have your dad and your brother, and it's also heartbreaking that you only have half of your family because of those cult ideas and indoctrination. But it's so great that you have chosen that boundary for yourself, because that's also a huge part of healing, is choosing who gets to be in your life and who gets to interact with you.
Yeah. And that is a challenging process to go through, especially with family.
Absolutely. I've been there myself. So at the end, we always talk about how you're doing in the consciousness side of your story. What makes you happy, at peace? What brings you joy?
Oh, well, happiness, peace, joy. Let's see. Mr. Maple and Paul, in that order.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Mr. Maple, the guide dog.
Mr. Maple, my dog, brings nothing but peace. So I totally respect that, Matthew.
Yeah, no, Paul, Mr. Maple, the lives that we've built together,
And music.
music.
Music is still something that is so taps into
Yeah,
joy.
I'm working on a new album
Yeah.
right now, and
Oh,
that's
that's
just so
great.
fulfilling and so wonderful to be able to continue to do that. And I've got a list of albums that will keep me busy for years that I want to put out.
And Matthew wakes up every morning and he always puts on classical music. He's taught me everything I know about classical music. So I've
Aw.
reciprocated with, information about Jennifer Aniston and such.
Of course.
But of course. And he does play Tchaikovsky now, and we're allowed to listen to that.
Yeah.
So
Okay. It's not off limits.
in fact, we seek out the gay ones now. I think they all were, to be honest.
Oh, that's so funny. Well, I love that so much. And guys, if you're not following them already, Matthew and Paul on Instagram, you have a YouTube channel as well. We'll put all the links in the description. But are there any other ways that people can support you, like with your music? How do they find you on Spotify?
Yeah, just search Matthew Castle, Castle, on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, Tidal, all of them. That's wherever there's a music platform, streaming platform, or download platform, I'm on all of those.
Amazing.
Yeah. And you can find my my books
Yes.
at paulcastlestudio.com. We do books and plushies. Matthew's really an integral part of my process because he's my art director, and we collaborate on everything because I, of course, have lost 95% of my vision. My books are based on us. So Pringle and Finn and their adventures are really inspired by Matthew and I. So it's really just
love
an
that.
extension of what we do online.
Yes, I need to get that book also because I just have your Adoroscopes book. So I need to get your other one.
Collect them all.
I know. I need the whole collection. Thank you guys so much for being willing to come on and share. Paul, as I was saying before to Matthew, I just got a slew of messages just coming in hard after Matthew posted about his experience.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, please interview him. So I'm so happy that we made it happen. And we just need your Linda Listen, sassy statement, or something inspirational to our viewers.
All right, Matthew, have you thought about this? We do know the video.
Linda. I mean, I would just say wherever you are in your journey, like hold out hope, be patient with the process, seek out help. Don't try to do it on your own. Talk to experts, get a good therapist, try out a couple. There's usually there's excellent books too, reading, just anything you can do to be patient with yourself, to help yourself along the way, and surround yourself with supportive people who can be understanding, who can listen to you, hear you, validate your experiences, and then help pick you up and dust you off when you stumble.
That was beautiful, Matthew, but not sassy enough.
Not sassy enough.
Give me a
You do
sassy one.
sassy. You do
That could have been
sassy.
summed up with Linda, listen. You need a good therapist, okay?
Sold. Yes.
Sold.
Brilliant. Thank you guys so much. Any other final thoughts before we go?
No, this has been really fun. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah.
This is a wonderful opportunity to talk about something important.
Real honor.
Yes, of course. So guys, if you're listening, make sure to leave those words of encouragement for Matthew and Paul in the comments. We love to see those. They support the video, they boost the algorithm. It's the best way to support the podcast. If you want to support further, we do have a Patreon, patreon.com/cults2consciousness. We have some merch at cults2consciousness.com. We're going to Mexico. If you guys want to come, it's going to be fun. We're going to the coast of Oaxaca, going to swim in some waterfalls, do some cooking classes, all that fun stuff. Check out the itinerary in the description. And if you like this video, I will link 2 more down here below. We probably have 3 or 4 IBLP playlists, so you can check that out. And until next time, follow your highest excitement, be conscious, and be well.